In this video, sponsored by Archvillain Games' new sci-fi villain line of 3D printing STL files, I'll show you that you don't need to sweat the details. Some people say that miniature painting is all about the details, and as the technology for miniature sculpting and producing and manufacturing and all that kind of stuff continues to progress, some minis get more and more and more details, which can be a good thing. Some people like that kind of stuff, and some people, well, they don't. It kind of depends on what you're trying to do. Sometimes having a lot of detail and then just slopping a bunch of, contrast paint or speed paint or any kind of stuff like that over the top of it can actually make it look pretty decent. Details like fur or like little, scales on a lizard person or whatever like that. But other times people want to have kind of some smooth areas where they can get in there and do some blending and show off their blending chops, and that's fine. More details can be daunting to some painters, specifically sometimes beginner painters and things like that. They look at it and they go, geez, that's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of little belts and pouches and straps and all kinds of that. But the fact of the matter is that details shouldn't really be as daunting as some people look at them. You only need to paint as much detail as you want. This past weekend, I was at Vince Venturella's house in what was dubbed VincieCon, for lack of a better term, and it was my first. He's done this before several times. It was me and, of course, Vince and his lovely wife and their lovely dogs, and we had a great time. But it was also Sam Lenz, who you know here from the channel, and then Ninjon, aka John, who you know here from YouTube, and Miniac, Scott, who you also know here from YouTube. And it was a three day plus paint jam / hangout sesh / play test. We got some play testing done on the next game that we're going to release for Snarling Badger Studios. This is upcoming 2023. And frankly, it was also a sleepover. We didn't do each other's hair, but some of us have less than others. But it was a ton of fun. Now the rest of the guys, they were all there to paint. Like that was why it's not the only reason why they came, but that was kind of the main thing. It was a paint jam. Now I was not there particularly to paint. I was mainly in build mode. I was working on League of Votan, which I'm not going to run in 40K. I'm going to use them for other games. But those little Hearthkin, the main trooper guys, I like them a lot. So I worked on those, and then I also worked on the model that I'm going to be taking to Nova Open this upcoming August for the Capital Palette. So I'm in progress. That's built. But the thing that was interesting was that watching those guys paint for Golden Demon, that's what they were there for. Well, except for Scott. Scott was working on actually an escalation league for Age of Sigmar for his store back home, and so he was working on that. But still, it was obviously to a very high quality, and the rest of the guys were all working on Golden Demon stuff, so that's a very, very, high quality. But they were taking a lot of time and being very, very careful and paying attention to every single detail, which is obviously required when you are painting for a competition of that level. If you want to be some of the best painters in the world, if you want to be one of the best painters in the world, then honestly, that's what you need to do. However, you probably don't want to do that. You probably just want to get painted models on the table, which is generally what I also am looking for. Wouldn't it be awesome, obviously, though, if all of those models that you just wanted to get on the table, you could, wave a magic wand or whatever, and then they were, Golden Demon quality. That would be, I believe, as the children say, dope. Sure, but the problem is that you can't wave a magic wand, and you have to actually do the work and spend hours and hours and hours very slowly glazing and things like that, like the guys were this weekend. And the question is, for those of us who are not trying to get a Golden Demon, do any of us want to spend that much time on models that we're going to put on the tabletop and then eventually put more models on the tabletop and all that kind of stuff? And I don't think that we do. And the reason I don't think we do is because the internet is full of speed painting tutorial videos. So that kind of probably gives you a good idea. And as far as speed painting tutorials, I believe that there is no technique out there that will speed up your painting more than disregarding many of the details on your models. Every extra little detail that you painstakingly pick out and paint and shade and highlight and all that kind of stuff, it slows down your finished model. And I assure you there are a lot of details on your model these days that you don't need to fully represent on the tabletop. As an example, here's this Demon Star the Reckoning model from Archvillain's Sci-Fi Villain tier on Patreon. I love the idea of demons in like sci-fi armor, but I wanted to also paint him as quickly as possible. So I primed him not black, but black-brown from Monument Hobbies with my airbrush. But you could prime a model like this with, again, whichever dark color you'd like in any way you'd like, whether it's a rattle can, whether it's regular old brush, whatever. But once you get that base dark coat in this situation, because he's mostly wearing metal cool armor, it's then on to some simple dry brushing. For the sci-fi fancy metallic armor, I used my favorite Vallejo Model Metallic Air silver paint to dry brush the model, making sure to get it wherever I could reach. And if there were spots I couldn't reach, then they were probably in shadow, and so it doesn't matter as much. But I specifically did focus on the upper parts of the model, which are A, easier to reach, and B, where the light has a tendency to hit things, from above because of the sky and whatnot. But don't worry if you do get your dry brush, if you get it in places that you don't think that you want to be silver, because we'll fix it in further steps. Or maybe we won't. That silver that's in silver spots that aren't armor, it's actually kind of useful. Here, we use some Black Templar contrast paint over the gun, which has got some silver on it, and we get it on all of the parts. We don't worry about the details. There's like a cool round thing on the side of the gun that maybe is some sort of ammo chamber, and there's like some, piping or whatever. Just everything is Black Templar over the top of the silver dry brush. That's what contrast is for. Then we're going to move on to the leather strap loincloth thingy. And again, even though it's been dry brushed silver, we're going to put snakebite leather contrast directly over that silver, which may not make much sense because you're like, well, now you're going to have a metallic loincloth. But actually, if you use a bright silver color to dry brush over a real dark color, in many situations, people will have a hard time telling the difference between that and if you had dry brushed white over that same dark color. So honestly, it will look right in the silver parts, in the bigger parts of the armor, but in the little details, you don't need to go back and do those over again. You can just put that stuff directly on there and, the snakebite leather, and then boom, you've got leather straps. One of the important things about picking detail that you're going to ignore or not ignore is sometimes also looking at the model. And sometimes just believing in yourself. Space Marines have got a lot of pouches on them to carry I don't know what, but most of the time people paint those pouches like a brown color, like leather. You've got a blue or a green or a yellow or a red Space Marine, and then brown pouches. Like where's the Imperium getting all of this leather from? I mean, it's kind of weird. If you look at modern military, they also have lots of pouches for carrying stuff. It's the same color as their fatigues generally, and it kind of makes sense. So don't worry about that stuff unless you really want to. But if you do, very frequently you can just throw some snakebite leather or some other contrast color directly over the dry brush, and it'll take care of it. Now, because I am basic, I've decided that red skin, because demons are always red, of course, is what's going to happen with this particular model. So I use Blood Angel Red for all of the exposed skin on the face, some of the upper arms, a little bit. And again, I'm doing that directly over the silver dry brush, and it'll be okay. Now, to be honest, at this point, you could paint the base on a gray and put some dry brush on it and stuff like that, and this guy would be done. He's taken about 20 to 25 minutes, and if he was in a big group of troops painted in basically the exact same kind of quality, you'd have a good-looking tabletop army. But it's all about your comfort with the level of detail that you've supported, so you may want to go further, but then again, you may not. I'm probably going to go a little further. Because I'm a bit fancy, I'm going to pick out some other details as well. I'm going to dry brush the gun a little bit again with some silver to sort of kind of pop out a little bit more of that detail. It was dry brushed, then it had the Black Templar over the top. Now it's going to have a little bit more silver. Makes a gun look a little bit more worn. I know that real guns don't really usually look like that, but this is a space gun, so different story altogether. I'll also touch up the silver paints or points or whatever, the little thingies that are at the end of the leather loincloth, there's just the little weighted things and stuff. Since I've already got the silver now on my brush from that, I'll even force a few more highlights on the ridges of the shoulder pads and stuff like that to sort of pop those things out just a little bit more than dry brushing will. And now the last piece of detail that I'm going to focus on, I'm going to highlight up the demon's head with pure Pyrrole red from Monument. It's a very bright red, And I'm going to put it on just in the raised parts, like, again, the top of the head, in between the horns, tops of the cheeks and stuff like that. Maybe even on the mouth kind of area, and then wait for that to dry. And then just going to put some brown wash on, like, more the face so it gets into the eye sockets and stuff like that, but keeps the top parts a little bit more highlight. And then it's just time to paint the base, which I think is really cool on this model, the way that it comes up like that. And then I'm just going to wash the base a bit with a brown again, and then dry brush it with a light gray. It's very simple. Like, all told, this model, even with going a little bit further with some of the details, maybe 40 minutes completely. And if I was doing a bunch in like an assembly line style, it'd be even a little bit faster. There's nothing wrong with wanting to spend hours and hours and hours to make your tabletop army look the absolute best it can be. There are people out there, obviously, that love doing that, and that's great. However, the amazing amount of hours, the number of hours that something like that can take, very frequently will suck the wind from your sails, motivation-wise. I hear people all the time who are like, it's going to take so long for me to get this squad done because I'm doing it to such a high quality, and then that kills their motivation. And especially with big army games where you have so many models that you've got to get through. When you learn to truly speed paint by not sweating as many of the details, once you've determined like the levels of details that you do actually want to sweat, that kind of thing, and that's different for every person, then you'll really start to make progress on your minis. I hope this video has helped you to kind of like learn to stop sweating all of the details, or at least start to take a look at the details in your models and figuring out where's the line where the sweat stops or whatever. I also want to thank the sponsor of this video, Archvillain Games. They provided the 3D printed sci-fi demon model that I used in the video. You'll probably know Archvillain for the amazing line of fantasy STLs models that they've been providing for years through their Patreon and in places like My Mini Factory as well. But now they're getting into science fiction models made specifically for wargaming as well with their sci-fi villain line. You can subscribe to their sci-fi villain tier on Patreon, the link is down below, and get new releases each month. This month, it's 22 different models within the Demon Star line, and you'll also get access to the Star Vault pack, which has 9 pieces of terrain, 5 Explorer models, and a dragon. Check out all the Demon Star models in December and prepare for all the other new sci-fi models that they'll be releasing each month on Patreon, and then, eventually, on My Mini Factory after that. Thanks to Archvillain Games for sponsoring this video, and thanks for watching.